remember when we were so scared that we followed every single one? We were like, oh, and then
How do you say last name? Fortuna? No,
Did everybody get their baby fix? We're good? Yes. Alright. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to hear some really interesting design work that's been done by both our engineering design project students and some independent work that's been done. So we're excited to present that. We're also here to celebrate our seniors who are graduating from the WISE program tonight. We've certainly put in a lot of effort over these past 4 years or 3 years in order to complete all the requirements for the program. It definitely is above and beyond, but I think that they're interested in the fields that they've had a chance to explore while they've been here. It has been wonderful and really great to work with them as their teachers. So another thing that I wanted to say before we begin the presentations is a recent recognition that Westover got. So Westover has earned the first College Board AP Computer Science Female Diversity Award for achieving high female representation in AP Computer Science A. Schools honored with the AP Computer Science Female Diversity Award have expanded girls' access in AP Computer Science courses. Out of more than 18,000 secondary schools worldwide that offer AP classes in general, Westover is one of only 167 to accomplish this in AP Computer Science. All right. So first I want to just introduce the engineering design project class that Chris and I taught this winter. So we actually have 18 students in the class. It was an amazing number of kids, and so we were able to see an amazing number of projects come forward with this. This year we provided a starting point for them, more than we have in previous years, and have them working on things that could address concerns that might come up with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so that was their starting point. And from there was a lot of creative design, just coming up with ideas of what disability do they want to try and help with. And there are so many opportunities, large and small, and so we really had some neat projects that came out of this. And some like early detection of seizures, making bookshelves more accessible from the lowest to the highest shelves and all around, to try and get really clean air in Westover dorms for people who have cystic fibrosis, but honestly it could help anybody. Independent showering, people with hearing loss of varying degrees to be able to integrate more freely into the classroom environment. Caned for someone who has poor vision or is entirely blind to help them in emergency situations. And also the ease of moving in and through Westover doors, which are quite big and heavy sometimes. So there are some really interesting projects. There were also two others, but you are going to have the chance to hear their full presentations tonight. So you will link that to them.
And then the independent research projects, those students had to go through a process last spring, where they put together basically a proposal, a problem that they wanted to work on, which included the background of that problem, and was supposed to build on kind of the WISE classes that they'd already gone through. So they're trying to build on previous learning and continue it onwards. They worked independently. They had a faculty mentor, which was Kate and myself, and then just myself after Kate left. And there were three main parts to the project. One was the process, which wasn't just the weekly meetings with the mentor, but also were they engaging in the engineering design process of working on a problem, coming up with a solution, testing it, and then cycling back around and doing that all over again and again and again. The product, did they actually kind of address what their original vision was. Did that have to change? Could they justify the changes, and just how complete did they actually end up getting? And then the presentation, which is the part that they already did once with John and I earlier in the week, and now 2 of the teams are doing today, which is, can you communicate your solution to other people? Because it's great if it's all in your head, but if you can't share it with others, it doesn't go anywhere. And then the 2 that won't be presenting tonight, we had a project with a student who was working with the patterns for making clothes, in this case dance leotards, and how to basically tailor them to individual people without needing to tailor, and basically doing that inside the computer and making those kind of changes. And the other one was a game that was an escape room type of game with multiple screens and side-scrolling action.
So without further ado, we have our first presenters.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Today we're presenting our product, Ask a Crutch.
Our product is called Ask a Crutch because it helps to improve the experience of using crutches on stairs. The first question is, what are crutches? The main function of crutch is to transfer the patient's weight from his legs to his upper body. And one of the purposes of using crutches is to avoid long-term bed rest, which can lead to complications. Some of the musculoskeletal complications include the loss of muscle strength and endurance, contractures, and degenerative joint diseases. Also, using crutches helps to reduce the hospital stay, which can be very expensive and unnecessary. And the patient can perform in his daily activities. Crutches are used for many temporary injuries, such as sprained or broken ankles and knees. And using crutches helps to relieve pain, reduce the healing time, and also to prevent further injuries.
And crutches can also be used by people with long-term problems. For example, people with lower limbs amputation often find it helpful to have a pair of crutches shortly after operations and during some emergency situations. And many diseases and disabilities that result in muscle weakness or atrophy may also require the patient to use crutches, such as post-polio syndrome and some congenital disorders.
There are several types of crutches on the market, and the ones we're focusing on are the underarm or the axillary crutches. These crutches are most used by temporary injuries, and these are also used by Westover.
The current auxiliary crutches have many problems, especially when people are using on stairs. It is easy to lose balance on the stairs as the person needs to shift her body weight back and forth repeatedly. If she trips over and falls, further injuries may happen. And going on stairs with crutches also require a large upper body strength, as the person needs to carry her weight with only the strength of her arms. And in some cases, when the patient wants to hold 2 crutches with only one hand and use the other hand to hold handrails, it is also difficult and inconvenient. And of course, using crutches on stairs is time-consuming, considering all the difficulties and problems that the patient wants to avoid during using crutches on stairs.
And that leads to our mission statement. Because people who use crutches often need a large amount of strength and lose balance easily when going up and down stairs, we want to improve the axillary crutches to provide a better balance and decrease the time consumed and the strength required on stairs. We came up with 3 initial solutions. The first solution is to add springs on the tips of the crutches, and hopefully that will help to absorb impact and also provide some support. However, we realized springs are not strong enough for the patient to use it on stairs to provide enough support.
And so for the cases when the patients want to hold 2 crutches with one hand, we came up with the idea of using magnets to attach the 2 crutches together. However, this may cause problems if the handrails are also made of magnetic material.
And the third solution we came up with was to have attached branches that extend out from the tips of the crutches. So it will hopefully increase the contact area between the crutches and the stairs, and it will provide better balance. However, this can be very problematic when the stairs are not wide enough.
And that leads to our optimal solutions, which consists of extendable tips and U-clips. The major part of our solution is to install extendable tips on the crutches. The tips consist of two parts, each is the same height of the stair. During normal setting, only one tip will be extended, and this is the overall design of our crutches. So in upstairs, the crutches have the upstairs mode and the downstairs mode, which can be started by pressing the buttons under the grips. After choosing the mode, the crutches will automatically extend or shorten according to if pressures are applied and if the tip is contacting the floor. So in upstairs mode, when I lift one crutch to the next stair, this crutch will shorten, so the two crutches can be still at the same level, and in this way, I don't need to lift my body to move the crutches to the next stair. And now one crutch is at the same level as I am, and the other one is on the upper stair. As I lean onto my crutches, both of them will extend, lifting my body to the next stair. By doing this, I don't need to use much arm strength, and I can avoid the problem of losing balance. In downstairs mode, the motion of the crutches are exactly the opposite of the upstairs mode. The crutches extend when I leave it to the lower stair to keep the same level, and both crutches shorten when I lean forward to take a step down.
In terms of power, we're trying to use scooter motor as our power source. The power of the scooter motor is approximately 150 watts, which means it will take 0.8 seconds for a 70 kilogram patient to go up one standard stair, which is 7 inches, fully relying on the crutches. And in order to accurately predict the patient's motion, we're planning to use two sets of sensors. The first set are the capacitive sensors, which are attached to the tips of the crutches. When the sensor senses no contact between the floor and the crutch, in upstairs mode, it will shorten the crutch, and in downstairs mode, it will extend the crutch. And the four sensors are attached underneath the armpit and the cushions of the crutches, and they will sense whether the person is leaning on the crutches, and it will lift the patient up and down depending on the mode.
And when designing our product, we see the opportunity to incorporate the solution of addressing the problem of using crutches on stairs with handrails. So we designed the U-clips, and the U-clips can attach the two crutches together by clicking them together, indicated by the yellow rectangle. And after the person finishes climbing the stairs, they can simply put it into like the sleeves between the two crutches, indicated by the blue rectangle. And we're going to use hard plastic as it is both strong and extendable. Here's the total cost of our crutches. A regular pair of auxiliary crutches is about $24, and our crutches cost about $141. However, because the U-clips are separated from the crutches, buying them or not depends on the preference of our customer. There are many pros to our products. So by using our crutches, you can maintain a normal movement and better balance on stairs, and you can reduce the time and strength required. Also, with the U-clips, the crutches can be held easily when needed.
And there are some cons to our product. First of all, it is more expensive than the normal pair of auxiliary crutches. And also, there will be some extra pressure on your armpits, especially when you're going upstairs, because you are being lifted, you are being aided by the crutches that are going up. And there will also, the weight of crutches will also increase by a bit. It's about 1 kilogram on each crutch. So it may cause some problem when you are not using them on stairs, but on flat ground. If we have more time and money, we're hoping to build a prototype of the U-clip, and we're planning to use the 3D printer in the Y Center. And we also need to work on the computer programming to connect the sensors and the motors. And also we are trying to address the issue of accidentally clicking on the buttons. Maybe we'll put a cover around the buttons so the patient will only remove the cover when they need to use the modes. And finally, we hope to build our crutches. Lots of thanks to Jana and Chris for helping us in this process. And are there any questions? She has one.
Back in cross country, I broke my ankle, and then I used the crutches for like a week, and it's really hard. It hurts my armpit, and it's really hard to move around in campus. And then in the winter when I did squash, I broke my ankle again, so I need to use the crutches again. So it's kind of problematic. So yeah.
So when you use crutches, you're supposed to put your weight, straight arms onto the handholds, right? So when you're coming up or down now, how are you going to transfer that? You're going to depend more on the crutch holding you in the armpit, or are you still going to be putting your weight on the hand?
You still need to like lean on the crutches because we have the 4 sensors that are under the cushion, and when you lean on it, it will automatically shortens or extend the crutches for you, so you don't really need to shift your body weight and like back and forth and use a lot of strength to like jump up. That's like the main.
So when you're moving on flat ground, there won't be the impact there anyway. So that's great. So you don't need that until you actually put the weight there.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you all for bearing with me in that moment. So for my IRP, I decided to create an automatic watering system for orchids. This was inspired by a college visit to Smith, where I will be attending next year, where I went to the Botanical Gardens and saw their bulb show, and they had tons of beautiful orchids, and I immediately came back and told Kate that I wanted to combine Arduino and flowers, and so a watering system was the solution we came up with, and Kate was the one who suggested orchids. The reason she suggested orchids is because of how difficult they are to water. The most common death of an orchid is miswatering, which is an interesting fact to find. Even when I was researching this project, I found insanely different information. And one of those reasons is the climate of where the orchids are growing. And so I decided to grow mine in the greenhouse here on campus. Another factor is how often the orchids are watered. And so 2 different ways I found to water them were once a week or whenever the soil was dry, which I was going to use a soil moisture sensor to determine when the soil is dry, but I'll talk more about that in my sources of error. So in my research, I often found that orchids are best watered at about 1 ice cube a week. And so I thought that would be a pretty good starting point. But when I got my orchids, which you can see one of them right here, the tag said 3 ice cubes a week, which also corresponded with some others, so I decided to water them to water 3 once a week and 3 whenever they were dry. And 1 in each of those categories would be 1 ice cubes, which is about 20 milliliters. 1 in each of those categories would be 2 ice cubes, 40 milliliters, and the others would be 3 ice cubes, which is 60 milliliters. So while I was doing this experiment to see how these orchids would grow, I created this health scale, which isn't quite really a health scale because orchids can still be healthy while at 1, where all the blooms are dead and the leaves are pale and limp, because orchids can enter this phase called like a resting phase, where they're just done blooming and they're still alive, but they're not quite ready to keep going yet. So this became a scale for me to determine how long the orchids were blooming and to make sure that my system would be keeping the orchids blooming as long as I could. So these are 3 of my orchids. These were watered once a week. A was 20 milliliters once a week, and this is not in A. These healthy blooms aren't. This is B, 40 milliliters once a week, and C is 60 milliliters. C was the only orchid that fully died during this experiment, which was quite ironic because C was watered exactly how the directions said. So one of the theories for that is because of, we'll get to that in the sources of error. A is a good example of the resting period. You see the leaves are limp and pale, and all of the blooms are dead or wilting. And then B actually is right here, and it stayed fully healthy throughout the whole experiment, except the petals were slightly frail, and so I decided that that probably wasn't the best option. These are orchids D, E, and F, which were watered whenever they were dry. So orchid D, which was 20 milliliters, was watered every day, and E and F, 40 and 60, were watered every other day, because in the 3-day period that my soil moisture sensor did work, that was the results we got. Now, D was quite interesting because, as you can see, it has a stem up here, but there are no blooms because they all fell off up there. But the ones down here stayed fully healthy. And so I assume what I decided was that it probably has to do with the resting period and it was overblooming. And so it was able to fully sustain those 5 blooms down here, but not the ones that were up here. Orchid E and F were both also healthy throughout the whole experiment. Orchid E, however, was frail like Orchid B, and Orchid F actually bloomed another flower during the experiment, so that's the one I decided to go for, and I would have my watering system water 60 milliliters every other day. This is a chart of the health of Orchid C. As you can see, it actually increased right in the first 10 days and stayed pretty consistent around 8, which was healthy, and then steadily decreased until about day 25 when 8 was dead. And comparing that to Orchid F, which actually rose from about 8 to 9, where over the few days where it actually created a new flower, and then back down to 8. And so because it stayed so consistent with its blooming, that was the one I chose. For my process, I first began with the programming, and so I programmed the pump and wired it into my 4-channel relay for my Arduino, and used the code from that to do a trial and error to see how long the pump should be on to pump 60 milliliters of water. I also programmed photosensors and a piezo, because the way I would be monitoring the water height in the tank to make sure that it was always full would be through refraction, and so I'd have a laser that would be refracted through the water and would be pointing at a photosensor, and because they were getting different values, they wouldn't, the alarm wouldn't go off, but once the water was down at a low level, the laser would not be pointing there anymore because it wasn't going through water, and then the alarm would go off. This is my code. So here I have an if statement to show if the number of milliseconds since the program has started. It has been 2 days.
turn on the pump for 1 second, which is what we ended up going with. Then down here, we check to see about the water levels, and so I have 2 photosensors, one for ambient light and one for the laser light. And so if they equal each other, play middle C, and if they don't play any notes. For my sources of error, the first one is the soil moisture sensor. We had a lot of trouble with it at first. The ranges of values you get from a soil moisture sensor are 0 to 1023. And if you put it in a cup of water, it should be about 200. And we were getting about 1019 when Kate and I were working on it, which isn't ideal. So we programmed it different ways. We changed the code. We did a lot of research on it. We changed the wiring. And it only ever worked for about 3 days when it mysteriously stopped working again. And so we just had to go with it. And because this was a time-sensitive project, I couldn't keep working on that while I had to do other things. One of the reasons it might also not work is because of the soil that my orchids are in. It's sort of mulchy, and so oftentimes the moisture sensor could be surrounded by air instead of soil, which might affect how its readings. Another source of error was that the orchids were in the greenhouse, and the orchids are supposed to be between 50 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and the greenhouse gets to about 100 degrees every day, which we think might be one of the reasons why Orchid C could have died. My last source of error comes from the pump. Because it's not an exact way of pumping water, the amount of water coming out of the hose depends on where it is placed. And so my pump can't pump vertically, which was the original idea, because I would like to have the tank under the table where the orchid was sitting, but instead it would have to pump horizontally. And so that's what, with my trial and error, that's what I found. So now I'm going to do a little demo, which is actually great because there's no water in here. So you won't, people in the front might be able to hear it, but other people probably won't. The pump goes on, and if the lights in here are controlled here. Yep. Or at least they were. Sorry. Let me get the. Yeah. It did go, but it's, what's worrying me is I'm smelling a burning smell. And I think that might be from the soldering from before. Yeah, because the pump's not going off. And so, and the solder's under the tape, so I can't quite check if it's working. So, as of 2 days ago, but so, yeah, because we had to connect to the pump to a 4-channel relay, we had to solder it together, the wiring, and that's actually one of the things that came out at the beginning of the presentation when we were moving it, so the pump's not quite working right now. So for my next steps, I would finish, well, I would fix that problem first. And I would finish with setting that up. And then I would encase the system, because right now it is very flimsy as you transport it. And I would also like to solder it so it would become more of a permanent solution. And then I would like to address the pump and the amount of water that it is pumping, and figure out a way to refine it so it doesn't change so often. Yeah, and those would probably be my immediate next steps in continuing this project. I would like to thank Chris, Kate, Jonna, and Heather for all their help and all of my support that I got from the students. So thank you.
Did you envision this being
hoped it would be more of a I'm going on vacation sort of thing, because I'm not very good at raising plants in my own home. But because of it being a school project, I had to do it here, and the greenhouse made the most sense. So this probably would most likely work more in greenhouses.
Hi everyone, my name is Maya, and today I'm going to talk to you about my summer research internship at Columbia University that I did this past summer. So my internship lasted about 10 weeks in the Department of Earth and Environmental Engineering, and each week I spent about 3 days working under the guidance of 2 mentors on my project titled Nanoemulsions for Effective Brain Therapeutics. This project was especially exciting for me as I plan to study neuroscience in college. So now I'm actually going to tell you about the project. So the purpose of the project was to design oil and water nanoemulsions with controlled size of oil droplets that are carrying drugs in order to enable the drugs to be successfully delivered to the brain. So I'm going to talk a little bit in depth about each of those points. So emulsions can be simply defined as liquid in liquid dispersions. This means that the droplets of one liquid are distributed throughout the second liquid, and a typical example of an emulsion is oil and water. Like I said, the main objective of this project was to design oil and water nanoemulsions with a controlled size of oil droplets, carrying drugs in order to enable these drugs to cross the blood-brain barrier. Typically, proteins are used to form emulsions. Proteins with their more complex molecular structures have multiple charges in one molecule, and therefore the protein molecules associate with the interface and can form a stronger barrier around each oil droplet. These protein barriers encasing each droplet are what prevent the coalescence or merging of the oil droplets and maintain the emulsion's stability. So that's a picture of a protein. So the blood-brain barrier is a diffusion barrier that allows only small, lipid-soluble, and specific molecules to pass through. By using nanoemulsions, we will gain the ability to inject medicines into the patient through arteries in the body that will potentially cross the blood-brain barrier and act at the desired area, which in our case was the brain. Developing this method will be advantageous not only to patients as a source of treatment to those suffering from various brain diseases, but also to the medical industry as a whole for delivering drugs across the blood-brain barrier. For example, patients suffering from brain atrophy, which is the loss of brain cells, do not have an effective treatment option to relieve their condition, as existing drugs are unable to cross the blood-brain barrier safely. Using nanoemulsions to deliver drugs to the brain could potentially provide the medical industry with a way to safely administer drugs for patients with brain damage or disease. When oil and water are put into the same container or beaker, oil will rise to the top and water will remain at the bottom of the container. This is due to the oil's hydrophobic properties as well as its lower density in comparison to water. The oil and water surfaces have high interfacial tension, explaining why they do not mix. When the suspension is stirred, spherical oil droplets will form within the water, only to rise to the top of the beaker once again, kind of like what's pictured. These droplets are formed because the immiscible liquids tend to maintain as small a surface area of contact as possible. In order to successfully make and maintain an emulsion, another substance is required that will create a casing around the oil droplets, making it possible for the water and oil to remain mixed together. Called emulsifiers, they form a barrier between the two different phases and therefore improve the miscibility and lower the interfacial tension of the emulsion. One type of emulsifier is called a surfactant. So a surfactant is a substance that typically reduces the interfacial tension between two substances that are immiscible, like oil and water. A surfactant consists of a hydrophobic tail and a hydrophilic head. Due to this, the surfactant molecules form an organized layer covering the entire interface of the oil droplet, with the tails of each molecule meeting in the center of the droplet. The hydrophilic heads of the surfactant molecules remain buried in the aqueous phase of the oil droplet. This in turn reduces the interfacial tension between the two phases and enables an emulsion to form. A variety of proteins also exhibit surfactant-like behavior. And actually, these proteins are even better emulsifiers than surfactants because they have a more complex molecular structure that gives them multiple charges in one molecule. Due to these multiple charges, the protein molecules associate at the interface and can form an even stronger barrier around each oil droplet. One such protein that can be used as an emulsifier is casein, with a complex molecular structure. Casein is a protein that comprises about 80% of the proteins in cow's milk and 45% of proteins in human milk. Casein is also used in glue, plastics, and for various other medical uses. When dispersed in a solvent such as water, casein molecules will form a structure called the casein micelle, as pictured in the corner. The casein micelle is composed of casein molecules as well as water and salts. The parts of the casein molecules that have an affinity for water form the outside of the casein micelle, while the parts repelled by water form the inner core of the micelle spheres. Casein micelles are porous structures that range from 200 to 250 nanometers in size. Casein molecules can self-assemble into casein micelles in the pH ranges of 2 to 3 and 5.5 to 12. The micelle structure is more compact at lower pH values and looser at higher pH values. So that's like a little background information. Okay, so for the first few weeks of my internship, I just spent it familiarizing myself with the equipment and making many, many different emulsions. And once I became more proficient, multiple experiments were conducted in order to provide an introduction to working with emulsions and particle size. So the next few sections will detail those experiments. So the first experiment's purpose was an attempt of finding the smallest particle size that could be attained by breaking down the casein micelles in two different oils, mineral oil and hexane. The two oils were selected due to their differing viscosities, hexane being much more viscous than mineral oil. A homogenizer was used to ensure that the droplets were as small as possible. And that is what a homogenizer is. So a homogenizer was used to create 4 different emulsions of varying concentrations. We have 1% and 2%, using the protein casein and 2 oils, mineral oil and hexane. So pictured there are the emulsions that I made. The yellow one is the one made with mineral oil, and the one on the right is using hexane. So I then used the method of dynamic light scattering to inspect the droplet size. Samples were taken from the bottommost layer of the emulsions, where particle size and droplet size were smallest. The droplet size ranged from 50 to 200 nanometers, which is slightly larger than the desired size, because the objective is to get the size distribution closer to 75 nanometers. But what I did find is that the emulsions made using hexane were found to have the smaller particle sizes. So the second experiment that was conducted was to measure the surface tension of the 2% casein solution mixed with varying amounts of deionized double distilled water in a total solution of 20 milliliters. So to make a stable nanoemulsion, you need an emulsifier that lowers the interfacial tension substantially. Measuring the surface tension allows you to identify the concentrations required to lower the interfacial tension to the required level. So looking at this graph, the surface tension was smallest when the solution was made up of 40 microliters of a 2% casein solution. So that is the concentration that would be ideal to make the most stable emulsion. So for next steps, now that we know the ideal concentration of casein solution and the ideal viscosity of the oil needed to attain a small particle size, the next step in this project would be to figure out how the oil droplet would return back to the body, circulate, and then decompose in the body safely after the drug has been successfully delivered to the brain. The oil droplets would need to somehow find themselves out of the brain and into the bloodstream for circulation. Additionally, we would need to find an oil with the same viscosity as hexane that is also safe to consume and travel in the body, as hexane is toxic, so you don't want that in your body. But that is an easier problem to solve because you can just do trial and error with different thick oils. So I want to say thank you to Professor Soam and Dr. Petra, who are my two mentors at Columbia, to Jana, my AP Chem teacher, for preparing me for this challenging internship. Thank you to all the WISE faculty for allowing me to present this today, and thank you all for listening. Are there any questions? Yeah, no.
Did you go into this internship already interested in neuroscience, or was this research what triggered your interest?
I'd say that I was already interested in neuroscience, but doing this research definitely confirmed that that was something that I wanted to pursue, like, further. Yes.
How did you get this internship? Like, did you apply for it?
Yeah, so...
Well, I mean, like, how did it come about?
Yeah, so, okay, it's like kind of a long story, but basically, last summer I was 15 years old, and a lot of summer internships for high school students don't accept anyone like under the age of 16. So, like, every college visit I went on, I would go and like ask the professors if they had any openings, and so on a visit to Columbia, I went and spoke to a professor and asked if he had, if he knew of any openings for anything that a high school student could do in a lab, and then he actually had one in his own lab, and so then I had to submit a proposal about why I wanted to like take on the internship and why I was interested, and then I also had to send like academic stuff as well, like my resume and things like that, and then yeah.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Natalie. My name is Marinella. In the ED3 project, we did solution for those who have hyperacusis or hypersensitive hearing.
So, why did we choose auditory sensitivities? Fall term, I was on the community service team, where I worked at the Waterbury Art, which is a daycare center for individuals with physical and intellectual disabilities. And for me, in my time there, it was especially heartbreaking to watch my new friends who suffered from auditory sensitivities cover their ears and hide when an alarm bell rang or when a phone rang. And so Nat and I decided to find a potential solution for auditory sensitivities.
As I will say in the next slide for what hyperacusis is a disability in hearing. So our background information involves learning the basics of how we hear. So what happens is sound waves travel through our ear. They hit the outer ear and the bones in the middle ear. Then they hit the cochlea. The cochlea is what interprets the sounds we hear in at different frequencies. And depending on where the cells move around the cochlea, determines if the pitch is higher or lower. And for what hyperacusis is a disease of the cochlea. Like I was saying before, the cochlea determines how high pitches are, and hyperacusis is when the cochlea is unable to determine if the pitches are higher or lower. And this is most common in autoimmune disorders, traumatic brain injuries, and metabolic disorders.
So, people of all ages can be affected by auditory sensitivities. However, individuals with autism are most widely affected. People with auditory sensitivities experience pain with certain noises and certain frequencies and pitches, and these are called trigger sounds. Trigger sounds are unique to each individual, and some examples of trigger sounds are blenders, bells, and vacuums. And the way that trigger sounds are interpreted by the brain is as danger and warning signs. So autism is a disorder that affects brain development in 1 in every 59 children. And one of its largest effects are sensory sensitivities. And research shows that 90% of individuals with autism experience sensory sensitivities. And over 65% of individuals with autism are sensitive to sound. And 40% of individuals with autism have been clinically diagnosed with hyperacusis.
And that leads on to our mission statement. So our mission statement was to create a device that enables children and adults alike who suffer from hyperacusis or hypersensitive hearing to be able to access all settings comfortably. We also want our device to be affordable and long-lasting with no frequent repairs. And in addition to this, we want it to be affordable, and we also want our newly created device to be accessible to everyone.
So these are the two types of current solutions now, and both are not suitable for long-term use, and they're not exactly practical for children or people with disabilities. So as part of our design process, we decided to find 3 potential solutions before finding our finalized solution. And our first possible solution was hearing aids. So we decided to design a hearing aid that instead of amplifying noise, the hearing aid would use white noise to decrease pitches and other noises.
Our second solution included a simulation or virtual reality therapy. So this is very similar to the idea of getting desensitized if you have an allergy. So what would happen was we would create a VR simulations for patients, and we would little by little expose them to their certain trigger sounds. So the frequencies would get higher over time, and we would slowly help them build immunity to them.
So our last potential solution was smart earbuds, and the smart earbuds would be paired with a smartwatch through an application that allows one to control the amount of white noise from their watch.
So here's some pros and cons of our 3 solutions. So some of the pros of the hearing aids would be that they're easy to operate, they're effective and have a reliable design, and they would be waterproof.
However, the hearing aids are not ideal for younger children or individuals with intellectual or physical impairments because they are a little bit difficult to use.
Some of the pros of the virtual reality would be that they're safe for both children and adults. It would be customizable and it would be cost efficient.
But seizures could occur if the individual suffers from a type of brain trauma.
And finally, for the smart earbuds, it's smart technology, so it would be easy to use for parents and children. And like I said before, it would be easy to operate for everybody.
And we did find that the smart ear could be a little bit expensive and the app could potentially glitch.
And that leads us to our optimal solution, smart ear.
So our optimal solution is a combination of hearing aids and smart earbuds. And this device comes in 2 designs, over the ear and in the ear.
We also wanted to be able to provide our customer with the option to use their own headphones. So like Marianella said before, we would design our own app, which we will talk about later. But we also want to give the customer their option to use their own headphones if they don't like our design. So we only ask that the headphones have a microphone, Bluetooth, GPS speaker, and noise canceling abilities.
So there are several key features of smart ear. The location technology ensures that the customer will never have to worry about losing their smart ear, as in the design app, it does have the location feature where you can actually pinpoint the exact location of your smart ear. And the white noise will allow an individual to have immediate relief of their trigger noises. The device also has learning mode, which allows the device to be customizable in learning their trigger sounds and specific environments that may have caused those trigger sounds.
These are some of the mock-ups of what the app may look like. They're not perfect, but this is what we imagined them to look like. One thing that Marianella did touch upon that we really liked having was learning mode. Learning mode is going to be mostly for parents that have children who have this disability. And what our main goal was, we wanted our smart ear to be trainable, so over time, and the more you use it, it would be more customizable to you, and it would soon recognize your own trigger sounds. So in the beginning, you would have the button, or the screen on the left, you would have that big button, and when you would notice your child maybe having a trigger or having those symptoms that are like with this, it would then correlate to the graph on the right, and it would calculate the frequency that your child is having during that trigger moment, and you would maybe know, okay, what would have happened. And these are some of additional mock-ups. So with the GPS, it will show you where the detections happened and where your smart ear is. So this may lead parents to know what trigger sounds that may have occurred depending on the area that it happened. And then like I was saying, over time we want our smart ear to be customizable to you, and it will soon recognize those trigger sounds for you and lower the frequencies in the ear. So then it would become an automatic log graph, and it would do it yourself for you. This is one of the hardest things about our project was finding a cost because, like I said in our mission statement, we wanted it to be affordable, but as we all know, hearing aids are not, well, hearing aids are very expensive today. These are some similar products that are like our smart ear but don't have all of our abilities. For example, AirPods are $160. Bose noise canceling headphones are $250, and Kirkland hearing aids are $1,600. So, like I said, our goal was to be affordable. So our end result was that if a person decided to purchase our own earbuds with the app, it would cost $900 to $1,400, but we would always have insurance cover it if needed. And if you choose to go the route where you have your own headphones, the app would cost $150 to $250.
So the technological pairing makes Smart Ear practical for all people. And for example, a parent can control the white noise levels through the Smart Ear application on their cell phone or even their watch for their child who does suffer from hyperacusis, and relieve them of the trigger noises immediately just from their mobile device. And the simple design ensures accessibility and reliability for all people. So lastly, our next steps. Our short-term goals would be to plan on testing durability and water resistance of the materials that we would be using, as well as developing a long battery life. And our long-term goals would be to launch the Smart Ear app and extend the battery life once again, as this device will be used on a daily basis. It's really important that we have a really long battery life. And lastly, we would also like to do field research to expand the effectiveness of the Smart Ear and use it with people who do suffer from hyperacusis and see the results. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
So, with that app, like for young children, how would that work? Because like, what about kids who are like 5 to 10 who don't have like a smartwatch or a smartphone, and they like go to school, so their parents aren't there to like help them put up the white noise? Like teachers aren't gonna be able to like focus their academic student, and I feel like that's when a lot of the times there's like alarms going off, there's loud noises everywhere. How would these help them if they can't access an app?
That's actually a really good question that we didn't think about. One potential solution for that could be, once the teacher notices, it's not that we want to pull the kid out of school to fix the problem, but that may be the case just to assess it before it gets worse, because having them in school while trying to fix the problem may be worse. But if we did have more time, that's a great question that we would definitely do more research into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I won't have a clicker, but I'm gonna have to yell at Chris. Hello. My name is Bridget Gattinoni, and for this past term, I've been working on putting a game of pool as my independent research project. Around this time last year, when IRP proposals were due, I didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to dedicate a whole trimester to producing. I hadn't noticed any big problems I could tackle with some sort of elaborate engineering feat, and I had no inspiration for where I could even find such a problem. What I did know, however, was that I was interested in 2 things. Chris? Physics and computer science. I sat down in my conference with Kate with really nothing to show other than these 2 subjects in which I was interested. It took her
a few seconds to suggest billiards. I thought it was a great idea. I loved playing pool both in real life and on my phone, and the prospect of combining a bunch of physical laws together in a game fascinated me. I didn't really know anything about the physics of pool, but I was eager to learn. And with a plan to take AP Physics and game development the following year, I felt pretty confident in my ability to figure it out. And so began my endeavor to code a game of pool. Chris?
This works now.
Okay.
Figure it
Okay, cool. Okay, first things first, what kinds of things need to be considered in regards to the actual physical laws of pool? I needed to account for friction. As the balls move across the worsted felt of the table surface, some energy is lost to friction. This means that my balls are going to need some sort of applied deceleration. I also needed to come up with some mechanism to get the cue ball to move. The cue stick needs to be able to exert a force on the ball at varying angles and magnitudes. The collisions needed to look realistic. As the balls move around the billiards table and hit other balls or hit the walls, they lose energy, which in turn further reduces their speed. The balls also need to bounce at the right magnitudes and angles. This is where the physics got the most difficult for me. So this is like a short little physics lesson. The conservation law of momentum basically states that the combined momentum of the system doesn't change before and after a collision. With momentum equaling mass times velocity, momentum up there is p, and then mass times velocity. The second line here is the equation of just all the masses and the velocities of each system before and after. So in my case, the difference between the masses of the cue ball and the regular balls is like 1 gram the difference. So I just, for my purposes, decided that I would refer to mass as negligible. So I'm going to assume that each ball has the same mass. So this allows me to only have to worry about the velocities of the system before and after the collisions being equal. So it gets a little bit more complicated when you have to start thinking about the angles at which the balls separate. And then it gets even more complicated when you begin to consider how these pool balls don't always collide head on. The position where one ball hits the other complicates the equation even more. Although I've now taken 2 years of physics classes, this type of equation was never covered in the depth I needed in order to first understand and then code this collision. However, with the help of Chris Childs, Ben Hildebrand, and some trusty internet research, I put together this method for coding these types of collisions. This method takes in the ball one is colliding with, finds the velocities and directions of each of the balls at impact, uses something called a minimum translation vector to calculate the resulting velocities and angles of each of the balls. And the minimum translation vector is basically just the vector connecting the 2 center points of each ball. And then it sets up each ball with its respective values for that post-collision. Upon my first trials, I discovered that while the balls were sometimes ricocheting at the right angles, they were speeding up at impact instead of reducing their velocities. This results in something that doesn't quite look how pool is supposed to look. I think I have to. So I'm hitting it with a very slow velocity, as you can tell, and then
Just keep it going. Keep it going.
So, however, so that looks really weird, and as you can imagine, with a bunch of balls on the screen, it really just does not look at all like how physics is supposed to look. So how I ended up fixing it is you look at, in this whole big method, The one problem I had was a missing negative sign like right here. And as soon as I put in, this is without the negative sign, as soon as I put in the negative sign, it starts to look how it's supposed to look. So I can show that really quick. So my controls for this is you click S to begin, and then you change the velocities at which you hit the ball with like numbers 1 through 5. So if I can do this. To move the cue stick, you just move the keypad a little bit, and it moves counterclockwise. So we ricochet. As you can tell, I don't really know if you can tell, but when they hit the walls, they reduce their velocities, and then also they stop after a little while because of friction. I don't know if I'll be able to get one in, but if I get one in, the score goes up by 1 and they disappear from the screen. Yeah.
Number two. Number two.
Yes. Okay, so in addition to fixing these collisions, I would, as I did, but just fixing them a little bit better, I would love to add more laws of physics into the little aspects of the game. Like how a ball has to have most of its mass over a hole in order for it to fall in, so it like can balance a little bit on the edge of the hole. Or how you can hit the cue ball at different spots, or even apply like skidding or spin. As soon as you begin to consider spin or skidding, it becomes more of like a 3D problem, whereas as I was considering it was more of a 2D problem. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. I would also love to make the game more realistic in terms of the rules of billiards by having it be a multiplayer game. I would add more of the nitpicky rules in, like how if you sink the 8 ball, the game is lost, or how if you sink the cue ball, the other player can determine where it goes. Of course, I feel like I could work on this for ages, just perfecting it and making it look more realistic and adding animations and everything. I could add animations here. The reason I left the space on the sides was because I wanted to add a little animation of the cue stick hitting so that you could kind of decide the force of the cue stick, not based off just like 5 preset magnitudes, but based off like how actually strong you wanted it. I could also add sound and animation, anything like that. So although the task of perfecting a computer game was daunting, and I would have loved more time to add more rules, I had a fascinating time investigating the different ways of applying each physical law in my code and tackling an understanding of a new aspect of physics I had never seen before. I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the help of Chris Childs, my IRP mentor, Kate Sabeth, Ben Hildebrand, and the entire WISE program. Thank you all so much for all of your help, whether it be in just helping me to decide on a topic, like Kate, in a quick physics lesson with Ben, or in sitting down with me and putting up with all my questions, like Chris. Thank you all too for listening. Have a good night. Thank you.
We have another round of applause for all of our And now it's time to graduate some seniors. Yeah. Lydia Davidowitz. Jia Cao. Ashley Harlow. Emily Hart. Serena Hogan. Camille Howe. Maya Kumar. Emily McDonald. Petulia Knapp. Sophia Pernaruski. Bridget Kurtzman. Sarah Tomasco.
So the Sally Ingersoll Fox Award is given to a senior for dedication to the Women in Science and Engineering program and for an outstanding culminating project. This year's award goes to a student who's been active in a great variety of science and engineering courses. She demonstrated a great problem solving in physical and structural engineering, excelled at computer science, got creative artistically and with her coding and computer generated art class, and was a core member of the robotics team for the past 2 years. We are pleased to award this year's Sally Ingersoll Fox Award to Judy Howe.
Thank you all for coming. That's the end of our program for the evening. Study hall. So there are snacks in back for anyone who would like to join us. I think study hall is still going on, and so should be re-entering quietly. Does that sound about right? Please re-enter quietly. Seniors and presenters, please stay for a minute because we need pictures. And anyways, thank you for joining.